So, okay, how do we go about it? I created one slide. I started to create, wait, so let me share my screen. I don't know whether that's the right way to do it. I don't know. You see my screen?
Yes.
All right, cool. So, yeah, there's a lot probably to go through if you want to go to all the nitty-gritty details. So, what I wanted to do with the slide is a bit say, let's focus on the big picture rather than on the nitpicking side of things, because otherwise we can get it away, right? And so our goal is to basically come up with a CRDs, which we believe we can implement in release 1, but would also give us some future proofness potentially that we don't have to work things out, right? And I think there is, in the whole process of the CRDs, there is basically 3 steps that we have to walk through. I focused in the slides because I didn't have the time on the first part, because I think that's where probably most of the discussion will be. So we have first, you get the high level intent, goes to the topology, NF topology manager, and then goes to the package variant set or variant set, and then it's going to be fanned out. And then I think we have hydration, and then we have workload. So these are the 3 steps basically. And so what I try to do is put a picture because a picture says 1,000 words before we delve into the details of the specs. And so what I try to depict is actually what Steven put in his document, I think, which is everything starts from NF topology that goes to a topology controller, which takes some inputs, and we have to discuss how we format that. And I think from what I understand, Steven, is so this triggers somehow the package variant set, and he will do the fan out as far as I understand. It's not important at this stage, I think.
Well, so this is actually.
Sorry, you're freezing.
Packet variant set that probably would be the one we use.
We are losing you.
So you.
Yeah, we're losing. Maybe switch off the video or something.
Yeah, let me take off the video. Yeah, so the packet variant is the one we probably will use, and then with packet variant, it's actually quite simple. You give them the source package and give them a basically something that looks at package reference, so a destination package name and the destination repository, and then a list of other things that are probably not that important now. But then if you hit it with package, they're adding a field. The Porsche team is now adding a field that allows you to also specify a sequence of cap functions, which, by the way, we're not expecting to have a lot of cap functions, and certainly not something that isn't triggered by a external controller. So we can ignore that too for now. So all it does is the topology, the NF topology controller takes the NF topology custom resource, extract enough fields to push to give basically source and a bunch of destinations to package variants. The problem for that, well, so this is the system would not dump anything into the main branch of the deployment repo until someone approve. So this fan out happen. It sits there. It's basically a clone package that sits on the deployment repo. So at that point, it probably does its job. So the idea is there's a lot of variants that we have to introduce, but then that is much better to do it on the NAF controllers versus package variant controller, because it doesn't have knowledge to do it anyway.
Which
so that's
what
the
I
input.
call
The
the
input is basically just
part.
Yeah, so that's the only input. The input would be I look at NF topology and then please replicate all this package based on what I need over there. And that goes into one of the reasons why I turned back the package reference on either class or non-class. Yeah, no, actually, yeah. So you guys changed what I had back in the early summer.
See, my original proposal before I talked to John was that the package reference was it. Stephen, you're breaking up, I think. I don't know.
No, I wasn't talking anyway.
Okay. Okay. So okay. Yeah. So before I talked to John, I had package reference set here, but then he moved it back in through NF class. But let's discuss that a bit.
No,
but,
so
Alden, you had
no,
a-
actually,
yeah.
the bigger issue here is package reference is not enough. So
Yes.
recall Eduardo was just say that the NF topology controller.
Yeah, you're gone
Is-
again, I think, Stephen. Yeah.
Stephen,
Stephen, you're breaking.
we don't hear
Yeah.
you at all.
Have to send it to a destination deployment. So that's based on if the only thing you have is package reference is supposed to go to.
Stephen,
There's no way for us to give it to really implement it. Then you kind of
Stephen,
understand that
yeah.
some of the CLD fields are not there.
Stephen, you're
we
breaking.
didn't hear
You're
you
breaking
for
up.
30 seconds.
Go ahead, on. Sorry.
You broke up for like 30 seconds, so we only caught like the last two sentences.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you could repeat, Stephen,
All
what
right.
you did in the last 1 minute.
Yeah. So
That would be great.
so okay. Can you hear me now, or is it good?
Hey,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's
Stephen.
okay now.
let-
Yeah.
I'll switch
So
also
on
off my
a fan,
video.
so on fan
I don't
out,
know.
the basic parameters that is needed is you need to give them a source package. You have to know what your destination is, and then that destination came from the cluster that you're going to deploy.
Yes.
So somewhere in the CLD, we need to have the cluster, and then we may fetch that from cluster info and stuff like that. But the cluster needs to be something that we can get, and then also I question whether or not one source package is enough.
Yes, so that's another discussion. Now, so in our proposal, the way that we would do that, and that was a discussion between, so in the current proposal, what would happen is the following, is actually topology controller, if I understand how this works right now, topology controller, so Anna will come back to you in a bit, if you don't mind. So topology controller would be split in two pieces. So he basically takes in the topology, which has multiple instance sets. Okay, so there can be different ones. What would actually happen is it goes to so this is coming from ISTI, whether we need one or multiple, we can discuss, right? But he wants to have different variation, different kinds of instance set controllers, but let's not go there at the moment. What would happen is this goes to whether we implement it in one or in a different one. I think I would implement it in a different one. So you basically potentially collect some information. It goes to that what we call the NF instance set controller that has a certain logic. In this case, clusters, right? So it basically through the selector, it basically lists the clusters. And it has a certain fan-out strategy. In this case, it's labels, right? So as we did before. So what I understand that you need to do in that controller is query the cluster based on the label selector. You know the source package because it's either in this thing or in that thing, right? So that's let's discuss that. And then we give it to the package variant set, which basically says, here is the source. Whether it's one package or multiple, let's discuss that later. And then it gives all the destinations, and then he can do its job. So in other words, what in the proposal that we are putting in place is that we have split this into two pieces. So one is the thing that takes in the input with a set of NF instance sets. He creates the individual NF instance sets out of it, which goes to an instance set controller. And that basically queries the clusters, does that thing, and then gives the work to the package variant, which basically does the fan out. Would that work?
Okay.
Stephen, any comment on that?
Yeah, just on the two parts. The first part then is the topology controller. Yeah, the first part is the part that takes in the topology and specializes it for the particular installation for this kind of, if you like, say,
Yeah.
service provider. Okay, and the second one then is the part that's actually handling the part of fanning it out, or the kind of mechanisms in sending it to whichever clusters it needs to be sent to. Is that it?
Yeah, so it has a let's say yeah, he needs to, they two need, so the fan out actually happens here, but he needs to be assisted at the moment, it seems, with someone who basically gives him the source and destination info. And that would be done by this guy.
Okay, that sounds like a reasonable separation of concerns, all right.
Yeah. I don't know whether
just on the
Steven is
instance
still
set there,
there.
Vim, can I just, and I'll carry on there, I'll ask in a minute when you finish that.
No, I don't know whether we lost Steven or not, but I was
No,
expecting him
just,
to respond.
did you say that you'd have one topology controller for each instance set? So if you had more than one instance
Wait,
set,
so,
then...
okay, so here is the thought. By the way, this is coming from Isti, who is not on the call, but I know his reasoning. So the way you have to look at at instance set is kind of the same as you have the reference to a pod. So an NF instance is a pod, right? And an instance set is the equivalent of a deployment or a daemon set or what have you. So you could basically think of, is this ID, so is that, for example, you could say, I need a UPF everywhere. Wherever you have a cluster, there is a UPF.
Okay.
Right? There's no label selector or whatsoever. Every cluster that we define, you basically go and deploy it, which is a different strategy. And so then, for example, saying, okay, I only want it on these sets of clusters, or there could be other criteria. So as a result, he came up with the thought of having different instance set kinds, similar to why we have different instance set, let's say pod deployment kinds in the cluster side of things.
No, that's fine.
Now,
probably the reason I'm asking the question is you don't have different types of NFs in that instance set. So if you have a separate,
correct.
If you have a separate kind of NF altogether, it's a completely parallel kind of silo. That's silos, but a completely separate kind of a set of components is dealing with that. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So an instance set is a single. So all the parameters within an instance set are the same. So that means there is one type. So it's either UPF or SMF or AMF for now. It's all the same vendor, right? Yeah. And it's all the same parameters somehow. As many parameters as we define are the same. Yeah. So sorry, we have you waiting for a while.
Yeah, actually, onward first. Yeah.
Yes.
So Stephen brought up something that we, during the POC and up until now, we kind of assume it will be manually done, which is when it gets into the deployment repo and wait for approval. Is that the way we're going forward for now? And eventually in the future, maybe add additional feature like notifications and things like that?
Yes, for now, I think we'll wait. So there will be a human that has to approve the package. That's what we are probably dependent upon from Porch for release 1.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to clarify.
Yeah. Tal?
Over to Tal.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit late. I missed the calendar time, but I have a feeling I want to take a little bit of a step back here, because looking at this, there's nothing Nefio specific about any of this. This is about kept packages. Actually, Porch, this is about Porch methodology specifically, right? This is not kept. This is about having certain site-specific variants of packages deployed. Creating that. There's a process here that I think, Porch is still a new thing, right? It's very bare bones as it comes. We're actually suggesting here an enhancement to Porch, right? That could be cluster aware, right? Porch doesn't have an idea that repositories are associated with sites. It has different deployment repositories, right? And we're deciding that certain deployment repositories are dedicated to specific clusters, right? So we have this idea of, we have certain a blueprint an organizational blueprint or otherwise. We want to give it some sort of transformation to make it, right, specifically adapted for a specific site, and then put it there, right? I have a feeling what we're trying to do here is an enhancements of Porch, which I think is necessary, right? And in the workshop, John created this POC called a deployment controller, or I forget what it was, that kind of does this. But I think, you know, what we're doing here has nothing to do with Nefio specifically, and that's fine, right? I think we should discuss how Porch works.
I think it has, because we want to do fan out, right? So we need a fan out strategy, and as such, it's related to Nefio, because one of the let's say premises is to deploy network functions, and we need a scheduler to do so. So as a result, it's very relevant to Nefio, because we need to define that logic. The question is, the reason why we started to discuss that, Tal, you were late, is that currently the flavor that we are going to have from Porch, and I agree with you that this should be a Porch enhancement. The question is, what do we do for release 1, right? So we need, it seems, an intermediate layer that helps Porch to be able to do its thing, because the only thing that it does right now, or that what we are getting, is you get a source package and destinations, and someone needs to tell it what those are, and then it can do its fan out.
Right. So if we're trying to do this right, you know, the whole point here was to go to redesign the CRDs in order to do them right. I don't think they should be called NF. They should be some sort of Porch topology, and have a way to plug in your own hydration logic and your own fan out logic, right? So
but that Porch already has. That Porch already has, right? We are focused in release 1 on network function deployments, right? So let's stick to that. Otherwise, we're going to have a discussion that will lead to nowhere. So we are focused in release 1 on network function deployment. That's what we want to focus upon. I know that Porch today, if you look to the DNS POC, what John did, Porch, you can go straight to Porch with any package and it will do fan out, right? But that's not what we are focused on. We are focused on release 1 on our 4 use cases, and 4 use cases are focused on network functions. So our currency in the POC, in our release 1, is network function. So that's what we have to define.
But there's nothing network function specific about any of this. That's my point.
Wait. Yeah. Yes, but what the content of this that we have is a network function template, as we call it, right? That basically is going to be relevant in the next stage. Okay. So at this stage, I agree with you, it's not relevant, but we need it for the next stage in order to be network function specific.
Yeah, this is important, because what we're doing here is assuming that NFs are kind of atomic, and that's a necessary assumption in release 1. But they are, in reality, in a deployed network, the NFs aren't atomic. They're containerized, but they do need to work together. And I mean, how much of that? That's a lot of the reason the configuration is so hard in the telecom world, is because you have to manage these relationships between things. But making the assumptions that NFs are atomic is a fair assumption for the first release, and then we can iterate the more complex cases after that. But I think it's good to be explicit about that now.
Yeah, at the moment, I have a feeling, you know, if we're planning ahead, right, you know, as I said, you know, we are doing things because we have a time limit as well, right? But yeah. I would appreciate if we put placeholders for what we're planning to do in the future, right? I would like this in some way to be decoupled, and you know, I'm also curious too. Everybody's just assuming, I think, at this point, that Porch is an absolute requirement for Nefio. There's been no pushback. I mean, Google has suggested it, and the community seems to be running ahead with it, right?
Well,
okay, but
I wouldn't.
Guys, can we focus on the CRD, because otherwise we are not making any progress. And I don't know whether we lost Steven in the meantime.
Is he? I don't know either. He seems to be on the call, but he can't speak. Well, I guess my point is, you know, I would like us to put placeholders, right? So yeah, we can design things right now, right? But we can design for the future, even if we can't implement it right now. That's my point. Right. So I think I just want us to have in mind that there are 2 different aspects here. There's the mechanism itself having to do with how Porch works, right? With hydration and then fan out. And these could potentially be implemented in other ways too, right? Because remember too, we
Sure,
have this
sure,
idea that- yeah, go ahead.
But I think right now we are set on ports for at least one. I think we cannot do without ports. So let's start with that assumption for now, because otherwise we are not going to get anywhere, I think.
Okay, well, let's be clear what we're doing here in terms of what's related to ports, right? I think the diagram talks about packages and NF topology, but we're talking about kept packages. That's what's going on here, right? We're calling it NF.
So what we are doing, and then so let's go back to the beginning, right? So an NF topology contains a set of NF instances or instance sets, right? That will go to a topology controller that basically, I was under the impression that it would do the fan out for us, but apparently it doesn't. And it seems that also the package variant, at least that's what I understand from Stephen, does not have any logic beyond the fact that you have to say this is the source and these are the destinations. So you have to say here's the source package and here is destination, and based on that you do a fan out. Okay, so that means that someone has to tell it. Okay, so what we were discussing is at the moment in NF topology we have NF instance sets. NF instance sets is a definition of a network function that so there can be various, but they're all of the same type. So meaning they're either UPF, SMF, AMF, and they will be from a specific vendor. So that's where there is a unit that we are scheduling, right? So, and that will be relevant in the hydration process going forward. At this stage, it's not really relevant. The only thing that we have to understand right now is their reference to the package and where they have to go. So someone needs to basically understand what is the package that network function, that NF instance set, sorry, is referring to, and where they have to go. And based on that, we can basically have ports, the package variant sets, basically do its job. Okay. So I think we lost. Yeah, I'm not sure whether Stephen is there because yeah, he's lost again.
Let me try internally to see what's up with him.
He was here, but his connection was bad.
So while you're reaching out to
like you
Stephen,
said, Wim, I mean, basically, I mean, there are two things, right? I mean, Tal is talking about overall architecture and the components for it. Then the focus of this meeting, like you said, is CRD. So probably we should.
So correct. So basically, what is in? I think for me, the discussion is around these type of things, because at this stage, the question is, we define the currency, but what I think is important are these four things that we have to somehow define. We have to deal with vendor specifics. Okay. We have to deal with deployment specifics. I think we have to deal with infra dependencies. So so basically, and that is mainly relevant during the hydration process. And there will be requirements that are probably relevant, that for which we need input from the top. So let me clarify what I mean. Okay, with that. So an infra dependency is, for example, if I have a network function, it will be attached to a set of networks, right? So as a result, in order to do hydration, somehow we need to explain that relationship so that the infra person can do its job and help the network function to be able to get connected, right? So that's why what I call an infra dependency. There is abstract requirements that drive decisions during hydration. For example, capacity, right? So if we say we need a certain capacity, during that hydration, we probably need to say, okay, this is the set of scale that we need for this network function in order to do its job, right? There is also deployment specific parameters. So infra is of course one of them, but there is, for example, deployment parameters that come from the top but there is others that we can, for example, in release 1, in my view, hard code. So, for example, Steven, in his set of CRDs, used, for example, BGP, right? So he says, okay, I want to use BGP. We don't want this to come from a high-level intent, because there's no point to say, here is BGP. We could basically, in the hydration process, say, here, we want to use BGP for this network function and let it do its job. We could, for example, also say, at the moment hard-coded, we use Azure IOV or we use MAC VLAN, so other specific parameters that you don't want to have, let's say, defined at the top, but that you want to have because someone needs to basically do something in order to have that network function deployed, right? So this is what I call deployment specifics that are potentially not relevant towards in the top level CRDs, but they might be relevant in the hydration part of things because someone needs to basically figure out that requirement and resolve that, right? And then the fourth element, which is also, I think, important to discuss, is the vendor specifics, right? We could go two ways in FEO, in my view. One way is we define every freaking parameter in 3GPP that basically comes up, and we have to define it in a CRD. I'm personally of the opinion we should avoid that completely, okay? Now, the question is then also,
So yeah, we had for a while we've been discussing a meta model that allows for extensibility. I think this is exactly where it comes in, right? The idea that NF class would be something like a UPF, right? Which would be very bare bones basic, right? But then we can allow for vendor extensions, right? So
yes,
the NF class could point to, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what indeed, so I've put that back here. Steven wants it back here. So that's a discussion we need to have, is where does that go? But we had
it's a one-to-one here, right? So, I mean, the meta model could be different. Instead of having a single class for an NF instance set, there could be a list of classes, right? So there could be a one-to-many. There could be a common class, and there can be various vendor extensions that come in, right? So instead of having a one-to-one, it would be 1 to n, right? So
I don't think you can have 1 to n. What you could have, because an NF instance set is a single entity that you're going to fan out. So so you could have, of course, multiple classes that you refer to, but
yeah,
you
that's
have
my point.
Okay, but then it's not of the same type. It's a different class.
Exactly. There are a few meta models you can have, right? So you can have a one-to-one and then have the NF class refer to others, or you can think of it of it as extensions, right? So you have a single NF instance set and a few different associated implementations with it, right? So it's kind of up to us, right? This is what we're designing, so we can think of it in different ways, right?
Yeah, so this was one of the discussions we are discussing whether to put it here or put it there. And it would be good to have Steven's input because when we were discussing, we were going always back and forth between them. Okay. You're back, Steven?
Yeah, hopefully for long enough.
Yeah, it sounds much better now, Steven.
Okay. So the instance set, by definition of the name, is a list, is a set, it's a list. So the
no, we can all okay. It can also be 1, but it can also be n.
Right, but each instance, we're talking about extending every specific instance, right? So
no, so in other words, what Steven is referring to is that this thing can result in fan out to be 1 entity or can fan out into n things, but they are all of the same class. All the parameters within them are always the same.
Well, in that case, it's just kind of like a replica set, right? So we can think, so in that case, I would actually take on the right, the NF class, have it get a list of extensions, right? So So what how you drew it here, I would actually at the bottom put, instead of X class, I would call it vendor extension. And then from NF class, there
sure.
should be a 1 to N relationship between extensions, right? So kind of a two-way.
So a class,
I don't know.
a class is more like a template. A class is, so going to gate.
You're moving. You're
Stephen,
back,
we keep losing you.
Yeah.
It seems to have all kinds of problems today.
No, it's okay now. I mean, they probably can be close to mic and speak, Stephen, maybe.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's the problem. I think it's a networking problem. Yeah. I was
Steve,
trying to
could you
see
finish up your statement? Your
Yeah.
previous statement.
So a class is a category of a thing that you want to define. So if we define UPF class, it's a category of UPF, which define enough templates that all the instance that will be implementing that class shares the same characteristics.
Yes.
Right,
But
but
what
that's
does go?
So when I define the class, UPF class, I put capacity there because it seems to make sense. UPF is just UPF. I mean, UPF is a bad example because UPF can have IUPF, anchor point and UPF versus regular UPF. But then let's say SMF.
Yeah,
SMF is the same. SMF is the same no matter what you do. The only
wait,
change.
But Stephen, how do you handle different vendors, right? So you have a UPF from one vendor and a UPF from another vendor, and they might have different properties.
So no, so they're implementing the same. They're implementing the same category of stuff. So if I tell them, let's say for argument's sake for now, let's go with mine and say UPF class gives you capacity information. So if I'm saying that I want 1 gig uplink and 10 gig downlink.
Sorry,
they do
Stephen,
something entirely different.
we keep losing you.
Oh.
So I think I make it concrete, right? So I think what we are discussing, Stephen, I hope you hear us. No. So I think we have a class reference, but in your view, all of this should go to the right. Should go here.
Yeah, and then we take package reference out of a class.
And where should that go?
That should go in. So my view, when you define your instance, that's when you're saying that I have a class that I defined a long time ago. And then right now I want to try it on Ericsson because I've been doing it on Nokia. So package reference points to a particular vendor and a particular vendor version. That's the vendor.
Yeah.
So the next
it's gone again.
region, let's do Ericsson. And then so now the package reference changed, but then they implement the same class.
Yeah. So an NF template is everything is of the same basically kind because they're part of an instance set. So basically this is all of the same type. So, but your argument is that you put a package reference at this level already, right?
Yeah. So this is where John and I sort of.
Yeah, it's bad.
Sorry, Stephen. It's very hard to discuss with you today.
I think to me the class spec is pure describe the UPF type that what only has, right? And the NF is the collecting additional information.
And then I would specify, or do they just want to say, because I don't way I look at it is if I have a UPF, I'm not a
Even we lost you for about a minute there again.
Because I'm not a telco user. So can you guys hear me or no?
Now we can hear you.
You keep coming in and out. It's very hard to follow.
We lost maybe about a minute there.
No?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Let's try this time. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So there are two ways to look at it, I guess, in where the class is. As a user, is it more common to say I certify a vendor. And then so I know I'm going with Ericsson. So that becomes my UPF class. And then only when I want to instantiate an instance of UPF, would I say that I want an Ericsson UPF that can do one up, 10 down, versus 2 up, 20 down. So do you want them? This would be one use case reference. Versus as a user, I know that for different regions that I support, I have one category that is one up, 10 down, and have another category which is just 300K up, and then or 300 meg up, and then 1 gig down would be good enough. So I would, because I think it's a cloud. So I look at that as like UPF large versus UPF medium, UPF tiny. And then they would then say different vendors implement this specifications. That to me seems a little more cloud. That's why we want to. So John and I would like to go to SIG1 and see which way they want to deploy it. I don't know. But then we presented that to telcos, and no one as a product, but then no one objected. But then I would really like to get SIG1 input on this.
I feel like it's a little bit too simplistic, right? The design
it is for sure. Yeah, it is for sure. It's a starting point.
I guess so. I'm just really worried we're as a starting point creating these expectations for how it is. I would much rather this be a bit more meta, right? Taking one step back and allowing like these kinds of logics to be plugged in or even come from elsewhere, right? Because the whole design of if you're designing a fleet of 10,000 sites, right? They're not willy-nilly done, right? In a few CRDs, right? This has been designed and certified and tested at a much earlier place in the process, right? If you want to talk about shift left, there's this whole day zero left thing that happens before we even get to these resources, right? So
that's also I'm a bit with Tal here, is that I would also like more a pluggable system for release 1 rather than something, because see, if we have the ability to plug in a KRM resource of any type, you can do whatever you want basically. And of course we can make it specific for release 1, but at least you have the pluggability to extend it, because see, if you look right now, so at the moment this is what we have, right? So we have a reference to a package which basically is mostly an image and stuff like that, right? We have how you're attached to the network, we have capacity, and we have DNN. But if you look to a packet core like UPF, SMF, and so on, there is a gazillion more parameters. So if we have somewhere a pluggable capability that you can either have vendor extensions or even certain definitions that we as Nefio define, that would be useful. So for example, attachment, at some point I had it separate, okay? But then you look at, just to give you a sense of the journey I personally went through, I had it separate as a separate CRD, okay? But then you have to think, okay, how is the top level guy, so this person that is going to put our topology, is he going to put like a gazillion of CRs together, or I put a gazillion CRs to be able to specify his high level intent? That seemed also a little bit odd to me. You see what I'm saying? It's like you cannot expect someone to detail this out in 100,000 objects either. So that's where there is this chicken and egg problem of divide and conquer versus putting it together somehow.
So at this level, at this high level, user intent at different roles. So this is network designer architect level. I don't know if I don't know if vendor variance. I'm pretty sure there should be, but then for now, it's vendor variance really playing that big of a role.
So
see, but what you can have. Sorry, Bala. Maybe just to
because later on we download.
So UPF will be one vendor for that topology, and then you have, in my view, and then you can have AMF from vendor 2, right? So you will have mix and matches per type of network function, but not within the network function, I think. Sorry, Paula.
Yeah, thanks, Wim. So I had a similar similar kind of question, not exactly. So that's why first of all, thanks for putting this doc together, Wim and Stephen. I mean, I added some comments. So for example, that eventually when we create this UPF deployment CR, right? So that's why I said it should be verified by. So for example, right?
Yes,
verified by some.
but that's at the lower level. That's at the lower level.
Yeah.
Paula.
So
let's first focus on the
if you-
high level. Let's
yeah,
first
when you
focus on
jump
the-
to
on the
UPF
top, because
deployment, UPF
that's
deployment
we
is
are here.
definitely UPF
Yeah, what I
deployment
meant to
is,
say
is
was,
definitely something where vendor variance needs to kick in.
Yes,
Yes, for
so
sure.
I was going there. So before that, the inputs to that comes from the templates, right? For example, you talk about NF topology, and then NF topology has NF instance sets. It's a set of NF instance sets, and each one of them, one of the inputs is the NF template is the parameter. So what should be the contents of that parameter depending on the NF? So
correct.
That itself at that level, I think needs some vendor inputs, because right now it looks like it's like Tal said, it may be a bit too simplistic. That's what I felt it. Because it has, for example, it has the configuration for DNNs and or the BGP.
No, BGP is not there, because see, we have to. There is a thing. We have to look at two angles here. We are at an abstract network service design level, right? So the guys are not going to look at the nitty-gritty details. So it should be fairly high level, but not too specific. So in other words, you cannot expect these people to basically go and define all the nitty-gritty details. That's, I think, these are the two. We have to balance between those two things. I think.
Got it.
But,
so basically,
sometimes
that
they
level,
do, right? Because the design has already come, right? If you are picking a specific vendor for your deployment, you have to configure their product very specifically, right? It's not going to configure itself, right? So somewhere there needs to be a way to attach those extra parameters. To me, the natural place is on the right. You know, for the UPF class spec, I think there should be a list of vendor extensions, right, with their properties. And yes, you do have to prepare them in advance to an extent, but you probably are, right? And if they're not there, then you're expecting the product to configure itself, right?
Yes, so and this is where I think, where I want to basically rediscuss something that with Jean-Marie we have been discussing, because and I want to clarify it in this slide, maybe before you jump, Ravi. So see, the problem that we have is the following, in my view. So at the network service design level, you cannot expect the nitty-gritty details to come basically at this level, in my view. Like whether you need BGP or something like that, you shouldn't even describe at this level. Now, when during the hydration, before you go below, of course, depending whether you do shift left or not, Tal, but forget about it. It doesn't really matter whether it's shift left or not. At some point, someone needs to say, I want BGP, right? You don't have to basically define that here. What you could do, and this is where we had, when we had the presentation with Jean-Marie, we had this concept of an SRE config, which was an object known and controlled by what we call the deployment guys that says, okay, I need BGP here, right? And what would happen is so you basically say, okay, I have this network instance set, it goes down. And at some point there is so during that hydration element, whether it's a shift left or right, forget about it. At some point, these parameters get injected or mixed in, as some people as well, inside of the process and gets resolved. And that's what we called at the time the SRE config type of thing. And that SRE config would be resolved, either it's static and it will be hard-coded, right? So basically you get that inserted always, because you have decided I'm always going to use BGP, or it will be coming through a hint that you get from the top that gets that resolution.
Right. So hydration could be a very big process or a very small process, right? It could be trivial, in which it doesn't do anything, meaning that it already had all the properties in advance, or it might need to do a lot more because it will need to inject all those things. So that logic, I think, can be configurable. But right now, I think we don't have a basket in which to even put those properties. So I think this is what we're discussing, the CRD, right? So I think we need a place in advance for those properties. They could be empty, they could be not there, right? And filled in during hydration, but we need a place for them, right? Right now, there's no place for them. Right now, if we go back to the Go code, it is, as I said, it's extremely generic. It has nothing to do with any product, with any vendor or anything. I would say it has even nothing to do with network functions specifically. These are just like applications, right? So the UPF class spec,
except this.
well, except this, and here's the thing. I think it shouldn't be here. I think it should be
right.
in sort of extension, right? So yeah, so this is where I think, you know, this should be a bucket of vendor specific properties. And it's up to you, right? You could design something with all these properties up here, or you could wait later for the iteration process to attach them, right? So it's up to you. You can attach them here, or you can attach them later, but we need a place for those properties.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
So I have a thought on that, but before that, I want to give Ravi a chance because he is.
Yes, sorry.
Ravi, please go ahead, and after that, I'll go.
Yeah, I just had, see, because an intent, from the intent level, we are basically saying you need a UPF that has, a specific throughput requirements, like from a uplink and from aggregate uplink and downlink perspective. But then at some point, you have to kind of map it to certain cluster resources, and that's where my comment in that CRD document was. Like, I mean, even if we say, okay, we need these set of interfaces, whether those interfaces are doing kind of user mode kind of forwarding using SRIOV, or if it's kernel based, because there's a clear dependency on the performance there, or whether you require so many set of CPU, cores, and so on. So that decision has to be made. So I'm not clear when we say hydration, are those decisions going to be made in the management cluster or in the edge operator? And the other, I think,
these are
3GPP, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Ravi. I think we can. So, first of all, I think they will not be decided at the top. Okay, so they will be either decided at the management cluster if we do shift left, or later when we do other processes, right? If we can. And so, for example, we could come up with a strategy that we say, okay, when we have a watcher, we know the cluster has SRIOV or not. The capacity determines, okay, for this to reach this capacity, I need SRIOV, right? So someone will basically say, and the cluster has it. So we are basically, those two parameters are going to be used to determine the SRIOV, let's say, configuration potentially, or if there's other parameters, we do it with other sets of capabilities. This is, of course, already advanced logic, but you could think of something like that. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the other comment I had was on the 3GPP aspect. So basically, of course, like, I feel everything that's related to 3GPP, particularly from a UPF perspective, most of it will be around the 5G cost kind of configurations. But I think that's completely an OEM aspect of the configuration, right? I don't think that is going to be within our scope at all. I mean, I'm not
that's
sure
for me
why
yeah, these things I believe will be more what I call deployment parameters, right? Which will be determined most likely. They probably don't come from the top, but they come somewhere. They will be injected somewhere in the middle or at the end, right? And that's what I think. What I think Tal is saying is we need somehow a placeholder for a pluggable thing that allows us to reference something that we don't that we haven't defined at this stage. Tal, correct? That's what you're suggesting, I assume, right?
Pretty much. I mean, to me, again, the big difference we're going to show with R1, I think, is the openness to vendor-specific implementations, right? Right now, we're talking about, by the way, network function-specific implementation, but I would imagine something like Red Hat would want to insert their platform OpenShift-specific implementations as well at the site level, right? So we kind of need this meta model for extensibility at various levels, right? So Yeah,
and
but
we don't
again, we have
probably
to remember that all of these things are done with kept packages, right? So it's not just a single CR, right? A kept package could actually internally include a lot of different resources, right? So we actually have a few ways to think about this here, right? So yeah, we need a good understanding of how all these pieces work together. I hope everybody is on that page.
Yeah, in that sense, I think it's good to show the LCM of a network function as to what is captured with R1 and the configurations that might be coming later. But if there's one picture that shows that entire life cycle and say that, okay, this is what we do for R1, I think that will be a good level set.
Yeah, Ravi, and
sure.
So on this one, right? For example, Wim and Stephen, in the document I was looking at and commented on. So do you think at the topology level, the inputs such as the DNNs, DNNs is very specific to UPF, but the capacity and the NF attachment, is that a good enough definition? Good enough inputs from the intent perspective? Do you think that's all is needed? Or do we think something more needed even at the intent level?
I believe so. That's back to Tal's point, right? Which I also believe I think is important. Is okay. The parameters that we have here are the ones to do release 1 again, okay, or to have the ability to do at least what we did in release 1. So that's the parameters that we have here, okay.
Yeah.
Now I believe if we want to design it, we need somewhere a pluggable reference, and we have 2 ways to do referencing. So I built a reference type. So actually there is 3. So there is a namespace reference where you basically know the type. So you know the kind that you want, and you basically reference namespace and the name, right? So basically you say, I know it's, for example, attachment is a CRD. I'm going to reference that, right? So that's what this is. The second thing that we have as a reference is what Tal said, packages, right? So you could basically reference another package that has a collection of stuff. And the third is that you do a reference of what I call a GVK. So you basically refer to a group version kind, and then you basically have a namespace and name, right? So basically this is making you, so this is a CRD, this is a package, and this is a specific kind of CRD that you refer to. Here it can be any CRD, you see? So, and these are the 3 mechanisms at the moment that I know of that we can use to make it generic or more generic and pluggable. The question is how or where do we plug that in? Because what we are discussing or have been discussing so far is move these pieces left or right. And so on and so forth. But I believe that Stephen, who has important input, is missing here, and I think we are running out of time.
Yeah, the other thing is this, right? The pragmatism of having this seed code by the end of the month. Do you think this? I think the seed code looks like seed code. Stephen, I assume that it follows the document pretty closely. CRDs. Is that a good assumption?
Stephen isn't here, but yes, that's a good assumption.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
We're actually, I'll be very transparent. We're dealing right now with how far we want to change it. So the seed code is almost ready. There are all these internal processes for releasing it, but yeah, consider the document very close, or if it's not close, we can make it close, right?
Okay, I think we are running out of time.
The TC meeting is starting, so I think we need to.
I need to join. So yeah, I'll stop it. But yeah, maybe we should continue the discussion. Do you guys want to have another conversation tomorrow? I hope Stephen can join, because we wanted to have a conclusion.
Yes. I think we should definitely even at this current form, right? Wim, I think personally, we need to discuss the structure of the templates, whether we need to separate the templates for each NF type.
Yeah.
And some of the
Yes.
some of the at least low hanging stuff we should discuss, and then we can go from there.
I agree. Yeah.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody. Very interesting.
I'll
Thanks.
stop the.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah.